Some people say revenge is a dark path, but they never met my uncle. I grew up believing my family was ordinary, quiet, hardworking, invisible, until the day a whispering secret shattered everything. My uncle worked at a company where he gave everything, his time, his health, even missing family events just to keep his bosses happy. But when those same bosses found a way to steal his invention, they didn't just hurt him, they destroyed him. They took credit for his work, ruined his name, and left him with nothing but shame and debt. My uncle kept quiet for years, until the day I learned the truth. And that was the day I decided, silence ends now. What started as a simple search for justice led me into a world of corporate greed, betrayal, and a revenge plan so perfectly crafted, it would bring an entire department crashing down. And trust me, when the dust settled, they regretted ever crossing our family. Before we dive into what happened, let me say this clearly. This isn't just a story about office politics or personal grudges. This is a story about what happens when powerful people think they can step on the little guy and get away with it. My uncle never asked for recognition. He never demanded praise. He just wanted his work to speak for itself. But his silence, his humility, became their weapon. And if you're new here, I share real stories like this every week. Stories that remind us that sometimes justice doesn't come from the system. Sometimes justice comes from the people who've been pushed too far. So if you want more gripping, emotional, true stories like this one, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this story is only getting started. Now, let's go back to the moment everything changed. The moment my uncle walked into work, proud of the project he'd created, completely unaware that the people he trusted were about to betray him in a way he never saw coming. The day started like any other. My uncle walked into the office with a quiet smile, holding the final draft of the project he had spent months perfecting. He wasn't loud, he wasn't boastful, but anyone who looked at him could see the pride in his eyes. This project wasn't just work to him. It was the proof of what he could do if he was finally given a chance. But the moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. Conversation stopped a little too quickly. People looked away a little too soon. And the managers he trusted most suddenly wouldn't even meet his eyes. Still, he tried to ignore it. He sat down, opened his laptop, and waited for the meeting where he would finally present his work. But before he could even gather his notes, they called him into the conference room. No smile, no welcome, just cold faces and fake professionalism. They sat him down across from a stack of papers that looked disturbingly familiar. At first, he didn't understand. Then one of them slid the top sheet toward him, and his heart dropped. It was his project, his research, his design, his months of effort, except his name had been removed, replaced, erased. He tried to speak, but they cut him off. They told him the company was moving in a different direction. They told him the project was no longer his responsibility. They told him the work he had built with his own hands now belonged to the department heads who had contributed nothing but excuses. They expected him to stay quiet, to accept it, to walk away like none of it mattered. And for a moment, he almost did. He sat there in shock, staring at the people he had trusted, people he believed were on his side. But betrayal has a way of waking something up inside you. Something sharp, something unbreakable. And in that moment, my uncle realized this was an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a plan, a calculated move, a theft carried out by people who thought he was too soft to fight back. They dismissed him like he was nothing, told him he could collect his things, told him someone would follow up with him later. As if stealing his work was enough, they expected him to quietly disappear. But they didn't know him. Not really, because the man who walked out of that conference room was not the same man who walked in. He walked away slowly, quietly, but something in his eyes had changed. The hurt was still there. The shock was still there. But behind all of it was something they hadn't expected. Determination. And a fire they should have been afraid of. This was the moment everything began to unravel. Not for him, but for them. They just didn't know it yet. He didn't go home after leaving the office. Not right away. Instead, he walked through the city with the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. Every step felt heavy, but his mind moved fast, replaying every meeting, every conversation, every moment when they smiled at him while planning to stab him in the back. It was a kind of pain that didn't just hurt, it reshaped the person. And by the time he finally reached his car, the shock had faded. What took its place was clarity. They had stolen from the wrong person. That night, he sat at his dining table, the documents spread out in front of him, the original file still safely stored on his personal drive, the one they didn't know existed. He opened timestamps, email exchanges, drafts, and version histories. Every single piece of evidence was a weapon, and they had given him more than enough ammunition. The betrayal had been deep, but their mistakes were deeper. Still, it wasn't enough to just expose them. Anyone could make noise. Anyone could post accusations online or scream at HR. But that wasn't justice. Justice needed to be clean, precise, unarguable. So he began building something even stronger than the project they had stolen. He began building a case. He organized everything chronologically, every idea documented in his name, every revision showing his fingerprints, every conversation proving his leadership. And as the hours passed, his anger sharpened into focus. He didn't want revenge fueled by emotion. He wanted revenge fueled by truth, undeniable and irreversible. The next morning, he walked into his grandfather's house, a man who had seen more battles in life than anyone else in the family, a man who knew the difference between reacting and winning. When my uncle finally told him everything, every detail from the first sign of suspicion to the moment they stole his work, his grandfather didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He simply listened. Then he placed a hand on my uncle's shoulder and asked a single question. Do you want to fight this, or do you want to finish it? And that was the moment my uncle broke, just for a second, because even though he had been preparing himself for war, he still felt the weight of facing an entire corporate machine alone. But now, he wasn't alone anymore. Together, they contacted someone who didn't just understand corporate betrayal. He specialized in destroying it. A lawyer with a reputation so sharp the company should have felt the air change the moment his name was mentioned. They showed him the files, the timelines, the evidence. And by the time he finished reviewing everything, he leaned back in his chair with a slow, dangerous smile. They didn't just steal your work, he said. They handed you everything you need to take them down. For the first time since the betrayal, my uncle felt something other than anger. He felt hope, not the soft, gentle kind, but the kind that feels like armor finally being strapped on, the kind that tells you the fight is coming, and you're ready. The plan was no longer just about proving they were wrong. It was about making sure they never forgot the man they tried to break. And this time, they wouldn't even see him coming. The next few days moved quietly, almost too quietly. My uncle went to work as if nothing had happened, walking past the very people who had tried to erase him. They smiled at him, fake confident, smug. They thought they had already won. They thought he was defeated, cornered, powerless. But inside, he felt something entirely different. Calm, because the truth was no longer a burden. It was a weapon. And the moment he stepped into that boardroom with his lawyer by his side, that weapon finally hit its target. The presentation began like any other. Charts, projections, achievements. His manager stood proudly, explaining his brilliant idea, the one they'd stolen from my uncle. Everyone nodded along, impressed. But then the lawyer clicked a single button on the remote, and everything in the room changed. My uncle's name appeared. Not once, not twice, but again and again and again. Every file revision, every timestamp, every email chain, every screenshot, every proof of ownership. The room froze. His manager's face turned pale, then red, then pale again. Words tried to form but failed. The director leaned forward, confused and angry. The executives exchanged looks, each one silently asking the same question. What have we walked into? Then the lawyer delivered the final blow, a document outlining every legal violation committed in the theft of intellectual property, a document that guaranteed one outcome. The company had no choice but to act. By the end of the day, the manager who stole his work was escorted out by security, his ID badge disabled, his desk cleared. The co-workers who helped him cover it up were suspended pending investigation. HR was forced to correct every credit, every file, every record to reflect my uncle as the rightful creator. And the man they thought they could crush? He was promoted, given full ownership, and publicly acknowledged by the board. But here's the part that always gives me chills. He didn't celebrate. He didn't brag. He didn't even look satisfied. He simply walked outside, let the wind hit his face, and breathed, really breathed, for the first time in weeks, because it wasn't triumph he felt. It was freedom. He did not destroy them with anger. He destroyed them with truth. And that kind of revenge, it leaves no ashes behind. In the end, he learned something powerful. People can steal your ideas, your credit, your time, but they can't steal your character. And character is what wins the long game. If you've ever been underestimated, if anyone has ever tried to take what you earned, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the quietest person in the room ends up delivering the loudest justice. And if this story gave you chills, go ahead and smash that like button. Drop a comment telling us the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed. And subscribe for more intense, emotional Reddit revenge stories just like this one. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Because trust me, the best stories, they're still coming.